Welcome back to another DPS analytic video. This is going to be the 5th week of Naxxramas for Season of Discovery. Looking at all percentiles first, we only have the Frost Mage still underperforming. The only drop down we really have is right here next to the Shadow Priest, both Shaman specs and the Fury Wear. Other than that, everything is kind of close to each other. Only other big jump down is going to be the Frost Mage, which I was expecting to see them do much better by this point, but I guess not. Moving on to the max percentile, we still have the Fire Mage well ahead of everything else. Following that is the Balanced Druid, Ret Pally, Melee Hunter, and then the Feral Druid. Not too big of a surprise here if I'm being honest. As long as the Mage's set bonus is going to stay the same, I don't think that these rankings are going to change. Moving on to the 95th percentile, we have the Melee Hunter, Balanced Druid, Feral Druid, and then the Fire Mage, followed by the Ret Pally. A little bit more realistic here of what you're going to see. Frost Mage still very far down, like we were talking about earlier, and same for the Enhanced Shaman, but we did see the Ellie move up a couple rankings compared to last week. A couple other classes have moved up in rankings, like the Ret Pally has moved up quite a bit, and same for the Balanced Druid. Meanwhile, specs like the Destro Lock has went down a couple rankings. Both Hunter specs are pretty much the same as last week, with the only difference being Marksman and Survival kind of trading positions. Moving on to each boss fight specifically, we're going to start with Patchwork. Fire Mage just well ahead, just like always. 95th percentile, Melee Hunter, Balanced Druid, and the Frost Mage starting to catch up a little bit. Moving on to Grobulus, Balance, Melee Hunter, and then the Fire Mage. Fire Mage at the max percentile. For Gluth, max percentile, same thing again, except the Balanced Druid is very close this time around, and then the Ret Pally is right behind that. 95th percentile, the Feral, Balance, and Melee Hunter are beating the Fire Mage. For Thaddeus, Fire Mage still top dog because of that damage modifier, and then the Melee Hunter is in that 2nd place spot. Max percentile, not really worth looking at, as we know it's going to be the Fire Mage. Ret Pally, Melee Hunter, and then Balanced Druid right behind that. Noth, we have the Fury Wear all the way in 1st place this week. Following that is the Fire Mage and Frost Mage. 95th percentile, Fire Mage, Frost Mage, and then the Feral Druid, followed by the Ellie Shaman. For Hygen, we have the Balanced Druid, Melee Hunter, and then the Feral Druid. And then looking at max percentile, we have the Fire Mage, Fury Wear, and then the Feral Druid. Going on to Lotheb, Assassination Rogue, Fire Mage, and then the Marksman Hunter. For 95th percentile, we have the Marksman Hunter, Destro Lock, and Balanced Druid. So completely flipped around here compared to that max percentile. Moving on to Nubricon, we have the Fire Mage, Balanced Druid, and then the Frost Mage. Moving to max percentile, we have the Fire Mage, Frost Mage, and Fury Wear once again. So starting to see a trend here with those 3 classes. Moving on to Faralina, we have the Fire Mage, Frost Mage, and then the Ret Pally. Moving on to 95th percentile, Fire Mage, Destro Lock, and then the Frost Mage. Moving on to Mayexna, we have the Destro Lock, Fire Mage, Ret Pally, and then the Feral Druid, all very close to each other. Moving on to max percentile, still the Fire Mage once again well ahead of everything else. Moving on to Instructor Resuvius, Fire Mage once again, followed by the Frost Mage and then the Melee Hunter. Looking at 95th percentile, we have the Melee Hunter, Feral Druid, and then the Sub Rogue. Moving on to 4 Horsemen, we have both Warlock specs and the Balanced Druid, same places as last week pretty much. And then max percentile, something pretty similar I would assume. Only thing different here is now the Melee Hunter has moved up to that 3rd place spot. Moving on to Saffron, max percentile, we have the Balanced Druid and Affliction Lock. Followed by that is the Melee Hunter, Fire Mage, and then the Destro Lock. Moving to 95th percentile, both Warlock specs and the Balanced Druid once again, pretty similar to what we saw last week. And then finally, moving on to Kel'Thuzad, we have Melee Hunter, Destro Lock, and then the Balanced Druid. And then the Ellie Shaman making a name for itself on this fight specifically. And then looking at max percentile, Balanced Druid well ahead this time around. Following that is the Fire Mage, and then the Ellie Shaman again. And once again, let me glance over the tanks real quick, looking at all bosses. Pretty much the same thing as last week, with the Rogue tank being the highest, followed by the Prot Warrior, and then the Prot Pally. If we look at 95th percentile, pretty much the same thing as last week, the Prot Warrior moving down a couple positions, and then the Shaman moving up. And that's pretty much it for this week. Be sure to like and subscribe for more videos just like this one. Comment down below what you'd like to see next. And as always, I will see you in the next video.